Good evening, and welcome to our 10th Collective PAC virtual speaker series, Our Collective Power. We're going to get started in just a few short minutes, but I appreciate everybody who joined us tonight, and you are in for an outstanding treat. Good evening, and once again, thank you all for joining us tonight. We are here for our 10th, our 10th virtual speaker series, Our Collective Power. And tonight we focus on some more outstanding Black women that we need to uplift who lead every single day. You're in for an absolute treat tonight. We have Senator Nikema Williams joining us from the great state of Georgia. We have a good friend of mine, Pam Keith, congressional candidate from the great state of Florida. And shortly, we'll have Marilyn Strickland joining us from the great state of Washington. But ladies, thank you so much for taking the time out your evening. I am really honored to even get a chance to moderate such a dynamic panel tonight. But hey, let's dive right into it. So in 2018, a lot of people coined that as the year of the woman candidate that we saw in Congress. But when we look at 2020, in all respects, you could label it the year of the Black candidate. And we certainly seen a record number of Black women running running for office. So for you, what does this moment mean to know that you are part of such a historic class, that all of you would be first in the districts that you're elected to? And I'll start with Senator Williams.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for having me this evening. And I'm going to tell y'all heads up that I am not as young as I look, and went to the eye doctor today and got fitted for my first pair of glasses. So if I am like squinting, I can't really see tonight, y'all. So, but this year has been extraordinary for women, for Black women specifically. And living here in Georgia, coming off of the record number of voters that turned out in force to support my friend Stacey Abrams, who should have been our next governor, we know that Black women have always been leading. We've been leading in the state. We've been leading in the South. We've been leading in our sororities, Pam. We've been leading across this country. And there has never been a movement in this country where Black women have not been instrumental in making sure that it happened. So this is just our time to step up and lead in the forefront and make sure that we are the leaders that people are now electing. We've spent so much time getting other people elected, and it's about time that we get ourselves elected. And I cannot wait to call my soror Pam Keith my colleague in the United States Congress.
Come on now.
Hey, I gotta send that love right back to my soror Nikema, who is going to be the next member of Congress, walking in the tradition and footsteps of our great civil rights icon, John Lewis. Few people could give that seat justice, but I have absolutely no doubt that Nikema will do that. And you're absolutely right, Chris. This is a year where Black women are sort of bringing that Black girl magic to the table. We're bringing that the confidence and the purpose, that focus, that laser focus that we have to kind of march through the noise of our daily lives and how we are perceived, and how to remain focused on serving people and resolving problems. And there's so many picayune things that get in the way. I am so delighted to see how many are not just stepping up, but succeeding in ways that people really didn't expect. But I think at the end of the day, there's a pragmatism and there's a nurturing and there's a sort of humbleness that goes with the leadership of Black women. And I think people see that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Senator Williams, coming back to you, and Pam Keith kind of queued up my question a little bit for me, but we know you are stepping into a seat that was filled by a giant before you in the late Congressman John Lewis. He was an inspiration to so many of us. I know he gave me my political start. But you've been a trailblazer in your own right. When you look at you being the first Black woman to ever chair the Democratic Party of Georgia, I believe it was 2 years ago, I remember you going viral for standing with your constituents in the state capitol, standing up for what was right, and getting arrested and making some good trouble of your own. So I say all of that to say we know there is a legacy that Congressman Lewis fought for, especially when it comes to voting rights, and we certainly want to see it protected. But in your own words, how do you feel like you are prepared to forge your own legacy while upholding so many things that he fought for during his tenure in his lifetime?
So, Chris, I first have to remind myself and remind other people, no one can ever fill the shoes of Congressman John Lewis. He was a national, international icon, civil rights hero, my friend, my mentor. And I know that he showed us the way. He did his part and he paved the way for me to even be here today. I'll never forget in my very first campaign, Congressman Lewis was out of town and he had committed to hosting an event for me. And he flew in that night and came directly from the airport to show up to my very first fundraiser when I was running for state senate, because he wanted to encourage me. Congressman Lewis knew, just like we know, elections are about the future, and we have to do our part to make sure that each generation is moving us one step closer to full equality for all of us. So while I know that I'll never be able to fill the shoes that Congressman Lewis left us in the halls of Congress, I hope that I can drive and just have the inspiration from his fighting spirit, because we need it now more than ever. We need people willing to find a way to get in the way. We need people willing to get into some good trouble. And I am not afraid to stand up for what I know is fair, just, and right. So I am looking forward to being the voice of the people of the 5th Congressional District here in Georgia.
Okay, now, truer words have not been spoken. Pam, you, environmental energy advocate, you're a veteran, you're a lawyer, you're running in a district that is very pivotal to how Florida actually moves and whether or not it goes blue. So much, it seems, of your story has prepared you for this moment. For you, describe how you're feeling coming down these final 18 days, and what can we expect out of our future Congresswoman? And I'm going to say it to everybody, we're going to speak words of affirmation. I believe all three of you women will be congressional members, so we're going to speak that into existence tonight. So what can we expect out of our future Congresswoman, Pam Keith, and how are you feeling with 18 days out?
I got to be honest with you. It's kind of remarkable. It's kind of hard to read. You know, on the one hand, we see surges in Democratic participation. We see, we've done our polling and we're up by 2 points, but that's basically toss-up, right? That just means, could go either way. And we're definitely doing all the blocking and tackling we possibly can to get everybody to vote. And we see how important voting really is. In this district, it's going to make all the difference. And also having resources really makes the difference. Getting up on TV and radio and all those other things, super, super important. So I'm looking forward to this, and on the one hand, it's nerve-wracking, but on the other hand, you want to stay focused and not get ahead of yourself. I think what I'm most excited about is that I bring an intersectional worldview to this fight and to this serving this district. It is a very diverse district. It is not a predominantly African-American district, but what it does is it has people from all over the world. It has retirees from all over who come, they settle here. There are people from the Caribbean communities, Latino communities, and it's just an interesting mix. And what they're looking for is smart solutions. Very smart solutions. And we are at a pivotal time in our history when we're going to have to basically remake the American economy in January, because it's basically been hollowed out by the incompetence and dishonesty of the current administration. And so one of the things we know is that we're going to need to move to clean and renewable energy emphasis. My state is the perfect state in which to launch that effort. I worked for some time for one of the biggest producers of clean and renewable energy. And I want to see solar really take front and center in our solutions to climate change. And I think that Florida is perfectly poised to do that. I think my district is in a great position to do that. I want to bring some manufacturing jobs right here to Florida 18 to manufacture solar panels. There's no reason for us to be buying solar panels from China. We can manufacture them right here and make sure that we're making good jobs and addressing climate change at the same time. And so I think that's the kind of approach that I bring to problem solving. And I think that's what's caught people's attention and said, wow, this one's kind of interesting. Got some new ideas. So I really do. I do look forward to this. I mean, a lot can get done when everybody's a little destabilized. When people look comfortable, hard to make change. When everybody's a little terrified, it's a lot easier to tackle some of the big stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see we have a new guest with us, Miss Marilyn Strickland, former mayor of Tacoma. Welcome tonight. And thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm going to get straight to you, put you on a hot seat, if you will. Okay. But as I just said, former mayor of Tacoma, you emerged from an incredibly crowded primary. I believe you had about 18 people in that race in the best of two, and you were the top vote getter. And when we think of Washington, we don't necessarily think of seeing Black candidates run for the U.S. Congress. And you would, I believe you would be the first ever, not only Black woman, Black person ever elected to Congress from the state of Washington, and you've been huge on the economy. You brought over $1 billion of investments to Tacoma. So I'm gonna ask you, similar to how I asked the other ladies, what can we expect out of Congresswoman Strickland, because we're speaking this into existence?
That's right.
When you make history on November 3rd, what can we expect to get out of you as a fighter in Congress this year?
Great. Well, thank you very much for that question. And it is my honor to be here with the other candidates. So hello, nice to see you both. And thank you, Chris, for hosting us today. So as we think about what to expect coming out of Congress in this next session, there are some things that I think are sadly true. So, we're waiting for a package to be passed, a relief package right now, and hopefully something will be passed in 2020, but we will still be in the middle of a pandemic. And so as I think about where I'm going to focus my effort, it's going to have to be on working with what I hope is a new administration and thinking about a national strategy to address this pandemic. And it means a few things. It means that we need to consider manufacturing the protective equipment that we need here at home instead of having to import it and not have an ample supply. It means that we have to follow the science, the medical science, not the political science, and think about testing, contact tracing, and what it's going to take to really get control of this coronavirus. And I say that because we are not going to have a full and sustainable economic recovery if we do not get this pandemic under control. Now, there are parts of our economy that are actually doing okay right now, but then there are parts that are still suffering. And I use the industry of tourism, for example. Until people feel safe getting onto planes, traveling to great places like Washington State, staying in hotels, dining in restaurants, even attending sporting events and concerts, we're not going to have a full recovery. So for me, it's about the pandemic. And then finally, the economic recovery is incredibly important, and that's going to require some things that are actually long overdue. We know that the pandemic has really exposed the inequities in our society. And that's everything from housing to healthcare to economic opportunity, even how climate change is addressed. So for me, as I think about putting America back to work, this is where there is a chance to have a ginormous infrastructure package. Mm-hmm. And for me, infrastructure means this. Yes, it's roads. Yes, it's bridges. Yes, it's mass transit and public transportation. But let's look at affordable housing, like infrastructure. Let's look at how we change our energy grid and think about that as basic infrastructure. And then finally, because of the online learning atmosphere, let us please look at high-speed internet and broadband as basic infrastructure. Mm-hmm. If we do those things when we think about an infrastructure package, we can address some inequities. We can put people back to work in high-wage jobs. We can address climate change. We can improve education. There's so much that we can do. And so for me, that's what I would want to focus on when I get to Congress with all of you.
Come on now. Well, I think you hit on a good point, and I think we cannot have this conversation without looking at some of the realities and what we are facing coming out of this pandemic. And really, I think even if we see a change at the national level with the presidency, we have a lot to deal with. Yep. And I know Georgia definitely has been hit hard during this pandemic. Florida has been hit hard. This entire nation has been hit hard. But I want to take a second to focus on Florida and Georgia and then go over to Washington. Unfortunately, you have governors in your states that, how's the best way to put this?
Just make it plain.
COVID was a hoax that wouldn't enforce just having common sense things to protect its citizens. Where you have so many citizens now that have a pre-existing condition that didn't have one before. Yeah. What does the road of recovery look like in Congress? In an ideal state, we also take back the Senate, but what does recovery actually look like in Georgia, in Florida, in Washington, in getting citizens' lives back on track, not only with their health, but making sure that we have an economy that's functional and people can work again? I'll start with you, Pam.
It's very difficult to say because You know, we have a governor in Florida, as you mentioned, that just doesn't believe in not in science, but there's this, you know, how do I describe this? There's this kind of like swashbuckling defiance that we see in super spreader events. These, I'm going to prove that I'm more, you know, independent or not liberal or whatever. And so I'm just going to pretend like it's not happening. And when you see these events on television, or even if you know, they're in your own community, you're just, there's no way to get your head around why they would do that. Like it's almost like they're trying to get people sick. And it's very difficult to understand how you recover from that without changing behavior. That's why leadership from the top matters so much. That is why I cannot wait to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris become the next president and vice president of the United States, because I think even the people that go to those events would be disinclined to do so if the leadership really changed the conversation nationally altogether. And we're really not going to get anywhere until we have morally sound leadership in Washington again. I just think that, you know, you can talk about masks and you can talk about social distancing, but unless everybody's bought into it, it doesn't mean anything. And I think that when we get new leadership, I think the media even is going to change its tune. I really do. And I think people are all going to start to feel like, you know what, let's do take care of each other. Let's do actually care about our communities. Let's not keep doing this. We want coronavirus to be over. They're willing to wear a mask, I'll wear a mask. Well, I'll wear a mask and we'll be all right. And I think that kind of leadership is what's been lacking. And I cannot wait for it to present itself in January.
Senator Williams, your thoughts?
No, Pam is absolutely right. We have leadership sets the tone. And until we have leaders in place that are willing to follow the science, take this virus seriously, and come up with a national coordinated response, we are going to continue to see spikes like we're seeing here in Georgia. Just this week, Monday, I had a deadline to fill out. If I have a 5-year-old son, Carter, who just started virtual kindergarten in August. And so this was my opportunity to fill out the form if Carter was going to go back to in-person school starting October 26th in Atlanta Public Schools or continue virtually. So today we got an announcement from the superintendent that our numbers are spiking. And so that in-person school is not even an option anymore, but it did not have to be this way. He should not have started his very first interaction with school in front of a computer screen. He's 5 years old. He is like, he's never even met his kindergarten teacher. And these are memories that he's supposed to have for the rest of his life. He's getting the foundation of his education. And you know who's going to be left behind? People who cannot afford to bring someone in to sit with their child while they're doing virtual kindergarten. Who's going to be left behind are people who still have to work outside of their home. Who's teaching those children who are sitting at home when their parents have to leave the home to go and work? My husband and I are very fortunate that we're working from home, and Carter has more support than he probably should have at this point. But it did not have to be this way. And when I hear Marilyn talk about the infrastructure needs and broadband access and our entire state, we have pockets and areas all across the state of Georgia where you don't even have access to broadband. Children are sitting in parking lots just trying to go to school at the local McDonald's to get a connection to a Wi-Fi. It should not be this way. And I suffered from COVID-19 in early March when one of my colleagues at the state capitol showed up to work sick. I contracted COVID-19 in early March. And so I consistently wear my mask when I'm in public, even though I have antibodies, but we don't know what the science says around getting this virus again. But I also want to model good behavior. I want to model the good behavior that every leader in this country should be modeling, that you wear your mask, not just to keep you safe, but to keep other people safe, because we're all in this together. And that's the only way that we get out of it is together.
Absolutely. Marilyn?
I just have to say, I am just so wowed by the intelligence and the passion of my fellow guests. Wow, just impressive. So Washington State, unfortunately, was the first place in the US to have COVID-19. And luckily, we have a governor who believes in science. And so we very, very quickly work with our health departments. He put us on lockdown. We had a mask order. And going from being number one, we're now in the low 40s as far as number of cases go. But the sad part is that they're spiking up again. And even though we're here in Washington State on the Blue Coast, we have people who refuse to wear masks as a defiant political statement. And it just doesn't help. And so, you know, as I talk about a national strategy, I actually hope that we have a federal mandate that we have to mask up. And I just think it's one of those things that can actually help. But we also know that, again, coming back to science, testing, and even the ability to have a vaccine that people are going to trust and feel comfortable using. And we know that there have been 2 pharmaceutical companies that have started clinical trials, but they put it on pause because people were having adverse reactions to it. And that's exactly what they should do. So they go back to the lab and come up again. But I know that, there's some concern within our community about a vaccine that feels like people, when the current president says, well, I say it's okay, you can use it, and people just don't trust that. And we know that sadly enough, in our community, there has been a history of using us to experiment. And so we want to make sure that people have confidence in what's going to be proposed, that we can use it safely, but it's going to take a while. And so as I think about 2021, a member of Congress who supported me said that in a very short time, 2 years, we're probably going to try and do nearly a decade of policymaking because the needs are so great. So, Washington State, as you mentioned earlier, Chris, isn't necessarily known as being the most diverse or necessarily with a large Black population, but people here are open-minded. I was mayor of Tacoma for 8 years, and my successor, my mayor, Victoria Woodard, is also an African-American woman. And in the 10th district where I'm running, it is not the majority minority district, but I did finish in first place, and God willing, I'll be in Congress as well. And so this is about proven leadership. It's about competence. And right now, given the crisis that we're facing, people want to be able to trust that they're sending folks to DC who actually want to do the work.
Exactly.
Come on now. Now, I feel like you queued it up a little bit for me. At the Collective PAC, we always talk about building Black political power in order to change the laws that we know sometimes harm us. We have to be able to change the lawmakers. And I think when we look at 2020, it's interesting. We saw so many protests from the unfortunate murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, but it seems like there is a real energy this fall, and people recognize the sense of urgency. And I think especially Black voters are recognizing why they can't take this election for granted. So if you all can, I believe Florida, Pam, you guys are just about to start early voting in another week.
Yeah.
But Washington, I think you started today.
Yeah.
I know what we saw in Georgia already with the lines early on. But how are you feeling about turnout thus far and what it actually means in people understanding the urgency and what's actually at stake in this election? And I'll start back with Marilyn.
So, if we think about the tragedy of what happened with policing and the police murders, I remind folks that this didn't just start this year. To be honest with you, it was Ferguson is really where it started. But America has a short attention span. And so here we are today. And for about a month, there were protests. It was top of mind. We were talking about it. And then it kind of feels like it's receded into the background. And so I feel as though we have a responsibility to make sure that we are going to address police reform and criminal justice reform and keep it at the top of our agenda. We know that the Congressional Black Caucus led the way and got the House Democrats to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And that act is not radical. It is common sense reform that can support what's happening in state government and local government, because honestly, policing is really a local jurisdiction issue. But we can have federal rules that do things such as banning chokeholds, getting rid of qualified immunity, requiring body cameras, and making implicit bias training part of police academy. Now, can we suddenly change everything with those 4 rules and the Justice and Policing Act? No, it's going to be a long haul. But I think it's important for us to make sure that this topic stays top of mind, and that, when we go to Congress, because I'm also going to speak it into existence, that we are able to work with our local communities and our mayors. And when they define what it means to have public safety, how can we support them at the federal level to do that work, to make sure that the system is just and fair and transparent, and that it holds people accountable?
Absolutely. Pam?
I will echo what my sister Strickland just said. It is going to be a multifaceted approach, and it's going to be years in the making to actually sort this out. But what I love about this moment in history, Chris, is that It is a moment where a statement is being made, not a request. The statement is that all American lives are equally important and that Black lives matter as much as any other lives.
Yeah.
And that assertion is to say that the rights and the responsibilities and the freedoms of the Constitution do not inure differently to us than to any other group. So we're not asking anymore. We're simply stating that from this point forward, America is going to function as a country that values all of its citizens equally, and that is going to be baked into all of the decisions that are made going forward. And if that involves undoing some things from the past, then so be it. All of us who are in accord with that are moving forward, and those who are not in accord with that are moving out of power because we're not negotiating about it anymore.
Right.
This is just the truth. You know, my father put on the uniform to defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As did I, as did my ancestors. And my ancestors were willing to do that, even though the rights of the Constitution did not, in fact, fully apply to them.
Right.
Right? They did that when they came home to indignities and injustices every day. All I'm saying is, to the extent that this country belongs to anybody, it belongs to us too. And we're not asking anymore. We're simply saying the time has come to acknowledge that.
Come on. I feel like that is a message that takes us to church, and it shouldn't have to be said in 2020, but it does still have to be said. Senator Williams, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to co-sign everything that we just heard because it was perfectly laid out. We're not asking anymore. We know that we deserve every opportunity in this country just as much as everyone else. I teach my son Carter to take up his space in the world and take up his space in the state. And I grew up in rural Alabama. And so what I look at going on across this country right now, and like Marilyn said, this isn't something that just happened. We saw this with Ferguson, but I would even venture to say that this was even before then. We saw recordings of it with Ferguson. We saw it being on tape, but what happened that was not on tape? And here in the Deep South, we know all too well of all of the injustices that we face as a people. And we're stepping up and we're claiming our power. That's what this is about. It's a struggle for power in this country. And some people who are still working on these antiquated rules and laws in a system that was not, I tell people all the time, I'm operating in a system that was not designed by people that look like me or for people who look like me. So when we ask ourselves why something like the Breonna Taylor case could happen, it happened exactly the way the system was designed for it to happen because the rules were followed. But it should not be this way. And so that's why we have to make sure that we're stepping up and we're supporting people like Pam Keith and Marilyn Strickland and Nikema Williams to get to the United States Congress, because we are the people that are going to make the laws different so that we can truly see full equality for everyone in this country.
Come on now. So you all hit on something very important, and you talk about not waiting anymore. And it's not just about not waiting for the justice that we demand, but not waiting with our candidacy anymore. Can you talk a little bit about what was the moment when you knew it was you that needed to step up into the role that you are going for right now? Again, it's a historic year, but I really do believe in 2020, we are seeing a changing of the guard in dispelling the myth that Black candidates can win any and everywhere from all corners of the country, whether or not you're in an urban district or rural district, it does not matter. So talk a little bit, and I'm going to go right back to you, Senator Williams, to start us off. What was the moment when you knew I'm prepared for this moment and I can do this?
So, Chris, I came to this in a very non-conventional way and not like my other friends on the call this evening. I am the Democratic nominee for Georgia's 5th Congressional District after my hero passed away, Congressman John Lewis. And so I was nominated by the Democratic Party to be the Democratic nominee on the ballot in November. but I still had to go through a process where I applied with 132 other applicants to be the Democratic nominee. And I remember that Sunday evening, it was a really short process, and I was trying to decide if I was going to put my name in the hat. And one of the things that I knew that I could do the job, I knew that I could run the campaign, and I knew that part I was ready for, because my grandma always taught me, if you stay ready, you'll be ready. And I am ready for this moment. I'm ready to step up and make sure that I'm able to serve my constituents and be their voice. But it was a conversation that I had with Ambassador Andrew Young, who held this seat prior to Congressman Lewis. And I called him just to talk through and just to make sure that I was going to have support and have people standing with me, because I knew that there were a lot of other people who wanted this seat. And so the attacks would start coming. And I had the conversation with Ambassador Young before I could even get to the point where I asked him what he thought. Like, I was trying to make my case, and he interrupted me. And he said, I hope that you're putting your name in the hat. I've been watching you. I've watched the work that you've done, the advocacy work that you've done, the work that you've done in the community. And I hope that you're putting your name in the hat. And when you do, I'm going to be right there with you to support you every step of the way. And so it was that moment that I knew that, number one, you don't tell Ambassador Andrew Young no. And I put my name in the hat, but I knew that I was ready because I have been doing the work. I've been on the ground in the community. I've been an advocate. And so many people discount other avenues of their life from being parallel to the service that you can do in public office. But we need to dispel the myth of what it takes to be ready, because we've been doing this work for so long. We've been leading in so many different facets of our life, but you don't always connect it to the work that you need or to the preparedness that you need to run for political office. So anyone out there watching, trying to still determine if they're ready, I would venture to say, just look at all of the other ways that you're leading in society, because you are ready. And I realized that what my grandma told me about staying ready was absolutely true. When you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, Chris. And I was ready when the moment came.
That's not even something that you can clap on. You just have to snap on it. Poetic words, but true words. Marilyn, what made you ready? When did you know that you were ready for this moment?
Well, I knew I was ready for this moment, actually, not when I was decided to run for this position, but when I was contemplating whether to run for city council back in 2007. And I say this because of the context of my family. So my father is from Noonan, Georgia, and he fought for a country, as you all know, that did not always love him back, fought in 2 wars, met my mother in Korea. And as I think about their legacy and what they had to endure, as I think about the people who came before me who first ran for office, Harold Moss, the first Black mayor of Tacoma, this is about a sense of duty and responsibility. So when I was contemplating whether to run for city council, I talked to my mom and I said, well, what do you think I should do? And she said, this is not about you. You have a responsibility to every person who came before you, who fought for the idea that you could even be a viable candidate to run for office. So when I was working at the Seattle Metro Chamber of Commerce, because I was the CEO there for 2 years after I got termed out in Tacoma as mayor, the incumbent announced that he wasn't running for re-election. And my phone started ringing, people started texting me. And you think very carefully about this, because this is a lifestyle decision as much as it is a tour of duty to serve your country. And my husband and I talked about it, and I just came back to my mother. It's like, this is not about you. This door opened because the people in the 10th district in this country need you in your leadership. And I don't say that out of arrogance. I just think about timing and preparation and how you're ready for something. Had I not worked at the Seattle Chamber for 2 years, I would not have an understanding of what the needs are of small businesses. I would not have an understanding of how there's an economic ecosystem that feeds revenue directly into government. And so it just gave me a different perspective. But I think given the fact that we're in a pandemic, an economic crisis, and social unrest, I'm actually prepared to do this job because of the experiences I've had that led up to this.
Pam? Oh, you're on mute, Pam.
Sorry about that. I have to kind of echo that there was a moment really for me, like an epiphany, an aha moment. And at the time that I was in-house counsel for a large energy company here in Florida, it brought me here, and I was having that disquiet that I'd done everything that I thought I needed to do to prove to myself that I was something, I passed the bar, I got on law review, I got the good job, I did the military thing, I competed in the biggest firms, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm good at this. But then I thought to myself, like, is this it? Okay, so I did all this work to get here. Okay, is this it? This is it? This is it? And I had that disquiet that, like, to whom much is given, much is required. And in my soul, I thought, wait a minute. This isn't it. It's not chasing paychecks. It's not, resolving one problem from a company and another and another. I built a career advocating for people, and I am naturally inclined to be pugilistic. I like mixing it up. I do. I'm good at it. And companies hire me to fix their problems because they know I'm tenacious and I'm comfortable in that kind of environment. And so, but if I'm going to put my experience, my talent, my background, my knowledge, and my best effort to something, should it not be in service to the people? Is that not the highest, best use of your experience and your talents and your energies and your passions? I had this epiphany. I was watching Marco Rubio give the answer to the State of the Union some years back, and he was drinking water and sweaty and just awful. And I was like, how did that guy get to be a senator? And the answer was, because he tried. Because he tried. He believed he belonged there. And the question was, do I believe I belong there? And the answer is, yeah. Yeah, I think that if I put together my education, I have a master's degree, a JD, I speak 3 languages, I've lived all over the world, I was in the military, I have a top secret clearance, I know something about national security, I'm an expert in labor and employment law, I know the Constitution, and I have the ability to be both passionately progressive and credible to corporations. Like, that's a really unique space to walk in our politics. And so I think, yeah, absolutely. I need to take this leap. And like Marilyn, it wasn't for this race that I took this leap. I took a leap and had no idea why or when or what it was going to lead to. But I'm so grateful that it led to this moment, because in this moment, we need leaders who will speak for the Black community, address social change, still have the economic and fiscal background to talk about fiscal and tax and other kinds of policy, who understand the Constitution, the rule of law, and what really needs to change in our model penal codes to stop penalizing poverty and really stop criminalizing mental health issues, and know how to make those changes in our policing and in our community safety concepts to make real change. I think in the end, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I certainly hope that leads me to Congress. I believe that's going to lead me to Congress. But in any event, it leads me to leadership. And I think that's really where I'm at.
So we can't talk about uplifting Black women who serve without getting to the heart of who's a woman that inspired you, and why were they so inspirational to you? And I'm going to come right back to you, Pam.
Absolutely no question in my mind that there's 2, because that's not fair. The first, of course, is Shirley Chisholm. She is my spirit animal. There is, when I think about the brilliance of Shirley Chisholm, her moral grounding, her righteous conviction, and the courage to state as a matter of fact that she deserves to be the president of the people. She deserved it back then, and we would be so much better off had she prevailed. But in all things, I think about the indignities suffered by the brilliant Shirley Chisholm and the challenges and the kind of resilience she needed to have, and the ferocity. And so she is absolutely my spirit animal. But there's another more modern example of my spirit animal. And as much as I love Senator Elizabeth Warren, I love her to death, Katie Porter is my spirit animal in Congress, because Katie brings out the whiteboard. Katie brings out the whiteboard, and every time she brings out the whiteboard, I pull up some Chianti and some popcorn, and I get myself ready, because she's about to take someone to task on the facts with the receipts and get it on the record. And I have such appreciation and respect for someone who does the homework, who does the knowledge, who digs in and shows where the people are being let down. And that is the kind of leaders that we need in Congress. We need people that are willing to dig in, find the facts, explain what's happening to the people, get them to understand it, put it in simple terms, and hold our government accountable to the people who pay these taxes. I love the way Katie Porter does that.
Marilyn, who's a woman that inspires you and why?
So the woman who inspires me, and she continues to, is my mother. She is 91 years old. She grew up in Korea during a time it was occupied by another country. She was forced to learn a different language and have her culture suppressed. She survived the war, married my father, and moved to a country where she didn't know anybody and didn't speak the language. And that admiration comes from her spirit, from her grit, and from her resilience. And I think that is something that we sometimes underestimate when we talk about attributes that people need. When you get to a place like Congress, that is a very big, hyper-partisan place and very competitive, you're not always going to get what you want, but just stick with it because you're resilient. And sometimes when things don't go the way you want, you get right back up and you keep on rolling. And my mother has always managed to maintain her sense of humor. Now, she is tough. She does not play. And you talk about someone who brings receipts, she will literally pull them out of her pocketbook. But with that said, she is my role model because if I am half the woman that she is now, it's like I will feel fortunate. So that is my spirit animal. That is my role model. It is my mother. But there is someone in Congress who I admire. And I admire her because she just quietly gets it done. Lauren Underwood is probably one of the most effective legislators on the Hill. And she has her background in nursing. She has passed legislation. She works in a bipartisan way, and she just quietly gets it done. And so when you think about wanting to be effective, you want to be able to say, this is a record of what I've done for the people that I want to go represent. And so I'd say the two people I really admire would be my mother, just because of who she is and her resilience, and Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, getting it done, handling her business, not with a lot of fanfare, but just getting it done.
So we're winding down to the end closely and soon, but I want to have a few rapid fire questions. So it's not all serious, but you can unwind just a little bit. If you were not running for office, if you were not in politics, what would you be doing? And we're going to go right back to you, Marilyn, to start.
So if I were not in politics, and I think about 2020, I would probably be a host of a podcast. And I've already thought about the name of my podcast. It would be called There, I Said It. And it would start with some sentence that I put out there, and we would talk about what it means. So I would probably be in the podcast world. I probably want to try and be a columnist on a blog or something. But just because, if you live long enough, you have this life experience and you have a perspective on things. And how could I use that to actually advance social justice, provide more opportunity for more people, and just have a voice and a platform to improve our community?
Pam?
I would probably be, something similar to that. I think I would really like to do like the public speaking tour because I really enjoy that. I love inspirational speaking. I love uplifting people and making them feel good about themselves, especially the people who hear a lot of negative messaging about themselves on a daily basis. I want to tell them how special and magnificent and unique creatures that they are. And I also love politics and policy. So I would definitely want to be involved in sort of national politics and policy conversations in a way that I could be. I mean, I'm still an advocate to this day. I still have a legal practice. I still represent people. My niche now is representing minority contractors who get involved in these big municipal contracts and somehow just manage to get themselves pushed out through underpaid or unpaid, invoices, and then they just end up replacing them. It's like this bait and switch, and I don't really like that. And so I represent a lot of folks that are in that category. So I do still practice the law. I still like being an advocate for people, but I do really think that I have such a passion for the beauty in people, the uniqueness of them. I think one of the things that I've delighted in this season is meeting people like Marilyn and Nikema. And, I've been on several panels, and every one of these wonderful women of color candidates are just superlative. There's not a one of them that is like a slouch or you're kind of like, oh, I don't know about that one. Like they're all just knocking it out the park in terms of experience, talent, communication skills, persuasive ability. I mean, they're all just magnificent, and they're all so different. And it just delights me. I don't know if you've ever spent any time with Pat Timmons-Goodson or Desiree Timms. I mean, they're just magnificent, or Candace Valenzuela. These are magnificent women. And I'm just so overjoyed to be a part of that sisterhood of, the 2020 cycle that is presenting America the best and brightest and most passionate and most qualified, incredible Black women candidates. It's just amazing.
Senator Williams, you're going to get double duty because we lost you for a sec and we're sure it was urgent. So 2 quick questions. One, if you weren't doing politics, what would you be doing? And second, who is a woman that has inspired you and why did she inspire you?
So I'll start with the person who's inspired me, and not necessarily a woman, because I look at so many people in this country that I have kind of modeled my career after and looked up to them. But the person who keeps me going and keeps me inspired is not quite a woman, but my 7-year-old niece Trinity, because she literally has no fears in this world. She's not yet gotten to the space where she knows that there are certain things that she shouldn't do and she shouldn't say. And so she lives her life out loud and on purpose. And Trini is my spirit animal. She will dance like nobody's watching, even when the whole world is watching, sing to the top of her lungs. And I want to continue to be as fearless as Trinity is in this space. And I want to create this world for her where she can continue to be her full self. So my little Trini growing up in Alabama, who is still living her full self at the tender age of 7, but well, not quite 7 yet, soon to be 7. But the one thing that I would be doing if it wasn't politics, I have a day job, so I hope my boss isn't listening. It's like, Nikema doesn't really want her job. But y'all, if I could be a college football commentator, that would be like,
wow.
Saturday mornings, I would be there all day listening and calling the plays. And I mean, I already do it from my couch, but if I could kind of find a way to monetize that and make that into my job, just watch out, because I might be like, psych, you thought I was going to Congress, but here I am following Alabama football, roll tide.
You know what? And you would have to be on the air to do that. You could do your own podcast and just watch the game.
Right.
I got to jump in here because that is my other passion in life is college football and cooking. So Nikema and I could have Black Girls Talk Football on Saturdays and it would be perfect. It would be
do it. Let's do it.
You got it. Because I can talk about as much as politics as college football.
Who's your college football team?
Well, it's got to be Boston College where I went to law school, and Navy, of course, because I'm me. But when I was in law school, it was my decompression. I literally got up on Saturday mornings. I'd start the pre-game, pre shows, and I'd stay up watching Hawaii play San Jose State on Pacific time. Like I just watch football all day. I'm a huge football fan, and so I've never seen Black Girls Talk Football, but I bet you it'd be entertaining.
Let's do it.
That would be amazing.
No, we got a couple of things here. One, we got to get Senator Williams to be a guest picker on College Game Day.
Yes.
Clearly, maybe when Alabama is playing Georgia. I feel like it's going towards that. I can't be remiss if we're going to talk about college football. Avid Michigan Wolverine fan. I was actually looking forward to my Wolverines hopefully beating the Washington Huskies like when I was growing up, but COVID changed that this year. No shade to you, Marilyn, at all. But wow, college football.
That's my thing.
Love to see it.
It's a culture, right? It is a culture.
Especially growing up in the South.
I was going to point that out. I'm more like a Seahawks fan, but I was going to point that out.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it has its flavor, and all the different parts of the country have their flavor. It's one of the cool things about college football is that you do get a snapshot of the different flavors of the country all over, be it the West or the South, the Southwest, the East, whatever. And, I love that. The other thing that I really love about college football is that it's so prone to surprises. It is so prone to surprises. And one of the best football games I've ever seen in my life was coached by a friend of mine who became the head coach at the University of Washington, Chris Peterson. I went to college with him, and that Oregon State win in the Fiesta Bowl is still, to my mind, one of the best football games I've ever seen.
See, we're talking football already. Yeah. So clearly a show.
We're taking over, Chris. You don't get any more questions.
Right. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it.
That's good.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
What was the question? question.
Look, we talked about doing things if you weren't doing politics, and Senator Williams just took us somewhere that I didn't know we were going, but I'm glad we went here.
But you know what, though? I'll tell you what's good about this is that one of the things that's really effective when it comes to getting an audience is like you show up where people don't expect to see you. And so I have never heard of a show that says Black women talk football.
We got to do it.
SEC,
sounds like a podcast.
Pac-12. I mean, I think that could be actually that's a good idea.
Sounds like a good podcast. And maybe you all can have it when you're in Congress, and that's kind of your off day.
Right.
Which leads me into my next and final question. Obviously, we're in a pandemic. You're on the campaign trail. What do you do for self-care?
I bake. I don't necessarily eat what I bake, but I bake. I've become an aficionado of making artisanal sourdough bread from like sourdough starter, and I watch all the videos on YouTube to try to figure out how to maximize my bread product. I just find it really relaxing to bake and to kind of get away from, get away from politics altogether. That's what I do, sort of just have some hours to myself. And before I go to bed at night, you know what I do? I watch videos of Simone Biles and the gymnasts out there. I just find it just completely blows my mind what they can do. And it really pulls me out of just the drudgery of politics. So every night before I go to bed, I pull up some video of gymnastics and I just let my mind kind of absorb that, and it kind of puts me to bed, and it kind of clears my mind so I can sleep.
Marilyn?
You know, I have to confess that self-care is very hard during a campaign, especially during the last 18 days, because your mind is just racing. And so if there's one thing that I would try to do better for self-care is just getting a good night's sleep. And you all know how hard that is, because you wake up in the middle of the night, you think about something, I should have done this. But I can tell you that when I do get a good night's sleep, it makes all the difference in the world for how you function during the day. And so I tell people, we historically have often thought of like, oh, they sleep because they're lazy. It's like your body needs sleep. And so when I can get a good night's sleep, I try really hard to take advantage of it. But admittedly, it's not easy right now. It really is not.
Senator Williams, bring us home.
So I have joined this group on Facebook, Black Women Who Love Outdoor Spaces, and it is addictive, y'all. And so I have been like, Amazon has been to my house more than it should be, like trying to get my fall decorations up outside and planting and getting my new mums just the right color on the front porch and getting everything decorated. But like the gardening and getting my backyard space together has been my self-care. And that group keeps me going, Black Women Who Love Outdoor Spaces. I'm going to invite y'all to join Pam and Marilyn.
So before I close us out, I have to say, clearly when the college football playoff comes around, hopefully, we got to get you guys back together to comment and give your opinions on what the turnout and your thoughts on the season. Ladies, it was such a pleasure to have you tonight. I am really honored to even stand in the space of you and talk to you. You're extraordinary. You're trailblazing. You're going to be outstanding congresswomen. Again, words of affirmation to it. And for everybody out there watching, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Again, this was our 10th event in our Collective Power virtual speaker series. We'll be back at it next Wednesday, October 21st. But to say to all, make sure that you get out there, you vote, you make your voice heard. There's too much at stake in this election. And again, thank you so much to my amazing panel tonight. And I wish you all the best over these final 18 days, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.